Do you think foreign governments have the ability to affect domestic policy, including elections, by managing to have fake news disseminated in this country? Is the U.S. doing this elsewhere?
So, so I would be the last to deny, or I would be the last to say, Larry, we've never done this. All right. I mean, there is good historical record of our, for example, pushing back against the Communist Party in Italy after World War II and so on. All right. And classically, what you just described is called a covert influence campaign. And yes, they work. Otherwise, people wouldn't do it. And in this case, you had, I think, unarguably, the Russians conduct a covert influence campaign, and in some ways, not even all that covert. They just wanted plausible deniability to at a minimum mess with our heads when it comes to American democratic processes. Second, to take the Americans down a peg when they talk about democracy to the rest of the world. Three, to exact some sort of revenge on Hillary Clinton for what it was she said and did with regard to Russian elections in 2011. And then, Larry, it appears as if the longer this rolled out, the more the Russians were tilting in the direction of favoring Trump. And then, if you believe the intelligence report, actually tailoring the campaign to give him a higher probability of winning. And so now, did it affect our campaign? From my vantage point, which is the intelligence vantage point, that's just not an unknown. That's an unknowable. And so that's why you hear Jim Clapper and John Brennan saying, we ain't going there. We're not talking about that, because we none of our tools, none of our art, none of our science would give us an insight into that. All we can say is what it was. We have high confidence that the Russians did. So there we are.
That makes sense. A few months ago, you wrote in the Washington Post that you thought Donald Trump was a, quote, useful fool, unquote, of the Russian president, Vladimir Putin. Do you still think so? If so, why?
So after he gets the briefing on Friday, right? And if you notice, they don't come out and trash the briefing, all right? They don't come out and say it was unconvincing or anything, all right? What they do, Larry, is they come out and say, yes, the United States has been victim of cyber attack from the Russians, the Chinese, and a whole bunch of other folks. And trust us, we're going to work on this cyber problem. You'll see. And frankly, Larry, that is a misdirection, because the content of the briefing wasn't that we got a cyber problem. The content of the briefing was we got a Russia problem. And the campaign, the transition, still refuses to face we got a Russia problem. And so I asked myself, gee, that's weird. And he's never criticized Putin, and he's never pushed back on the Russians. And they've got a lot of people that have been kind of in and out of the campaign that have Russian connections. And so I asked myself in that article, so how's that working? And being reluctant to impute to the candidate or to the campaign lower motives, I just simply saying, well, maybe they just don't understand. And then I hit upon that phrase you quoted, "Polezny durak" is the Russian phrase that was very popular during the Soviet period, when they would take advantage of naive, well-meaning people whom they actually held in contempt in order to achieve their objectives. And then I ended that article, Larry, by saying, and I know this is going to make a lot of Trump supporters angry, but trust me, that's the most benign interpretation I can come up with. So right now, Larry, I'm sticking with it.
And that was like 2 months ago, too, I think.
That was the Friday before the election.
Yep.